from the T.O.L studios, and today in lesson 11 we're going to take a look at what we were just finishing up with in lesson 10, and that was where I took the scale that we've been working on the last few lessons, and we took the C scale and I started talking about what chords are, that they're technically two or more notes, but we started with the first note of the scale, and I was telling you that you're going to go every other note. And we're doing what we call triads. They're 3-note chords. And we kind of came up with that. I told you later on I'll kind of tell you the right fingers to use, which it will be that. And then I kind of showed you how you could move those up. Okay. Go back, revisit lesson 10 if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But at the end of lesson 10, I started talking about the G scale, the G major scale. And I was saying we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to start with this one. So if we've got our scale, and again that comes from whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And that's why I'm going to say this is a G, A, B, C, D, E. Since the letter F comes next, we raise it, F sharp, G flat. Now when we're going to build chords in this scale, the only thing different, we're just going to start with the G note, but we're going to skip the A, put the B in there, skip the C. So that's basically, I'll tell you later on, that's what we call a G chord. Okay, and I think I said this in the last video, some chords are going to be called like major chords, minor chords. I'm saving this for another lesson. I'm just trying to keep this real simple for right now. Same thing, you'll normally do your chords with your right hand, your thumb, third finger, pinky. So I would do that like that. If I do it with my left hand, because sometimes you will do chords with your left, it'll be pinky, third finger, thumb. Okay, so it's kind of the same thing backwards, kind of like our scales when we're doing it, where this is 1, 2, 3, turn under. This is basically the same, just starting with 5 and doing it that way. So think of chords kind of that way too. So I'm going to do it the easy way so you can see this, but if we've got the G note, we add the B because we skipped the A. Okay, now I'll tell you why this is what chords are doing more later. I'll give you the rules, but I'm telling you, if you know your scale, when you build a chord on the first note of the scale, you're just going every other note, and that becomes a G chord. Then if we go up to the next note of the scale, the A, we do the exact same thing, skip, skip, and these are basically like chord scales. If I go to the next one, the B, skip C, skip E. The only tricky thing is here, don't hit F. We wanted F sharp. But that's still every other note because we never were using this in the G scale anyway. It would have been this one. So we went B, skip C, D, skip E, F sharp. Okay, so we so far have this chord, the first one I showed you. Now on the A note, on the B note. So C's next, skip, skip. Okay, so that'll be a C chord. I go up to the next note, the D, skip, and remember it puts us here, and then skip. So I have a D, F sharp, A, and I'll kind of go back through these here in a second. On the E, E, G, because I skipped it, skip the A. And when I go to this last chord, I'm going to go to the F sharp, skip G, A, and then the C because I skipped the B. And just like when we did this in the C scale, I'm on the note that we started with down here. So G, B, D. Okay, now if I did those with my right hand, I'll just stay at this position. If I did it on the, I'm going to walk all the way up to this G note up here. So I would tell you to take your thumb on the first note, middle finger, remember you skip one, so your pinky. Now like I was talking about in the lesson 10, I kind of just look here, go up one, everything's going to slide up one. And see, I'm skipping these. So I've got on the first chord a G, B, D. The next chord is going to be an A, C, E. And then I go to the next one, the B, it's a B, D, not F. Now again, I'm skipping C, skipping E. But remember remember it's not F, it'll be this sharp. Okay, so I did skip the C and the E. Got a B, D, F sharp. Then I go up to the C. So I skipped the D and the F. I went C, E, G. Same thing here. I'm going to go D, but not F. I want the sharp, F sharp. Skip my G, and I've got A. So D, F sharp, A. Now my E, skip the F sharp, G, and a B because I skipped the A. Now I'll admit, some of these chords look funny and they feel weird on your hands. I'll explain this. When I go to this one, it's not going to be F, it's going to be F sharp. So you can kind of see my hand, I just turn it. If your finger, I've got short fingers, ideally it's nice to have long fingers, but so you might have to shift as much as me, but you're just kind of just tilting in. You only got to get on the edge. So F sharp, A, and then my pinky's going to be on C. And it look like that. And then my G chord. Okay, so if I walk up through G chord and A, remember sharp D F, that's a B, then my C, and down to the D, remember sharp D F, and then an E chord, and then on the F you gotta sharp it, so this is an F sharp chord, and then a G. Now again, I'm going to kind of tell you, each one of these chords, they all are chords, but when it has a cheerful or kind of more happy sound, a lot of times you're going to see this written, it'll just say G chord, the way you hear me saying it. It's technically what we call a major chord because it has a happy sound, and I'll go over this a little bit more later. When you hear the next one, it's kind of a dreary sound, a little bit sad, dissonant. That's what we call a minor, so that would be written like an A, and then a little M, and that little M's telling you that it's a sad sound or minor. I'll go over the rules and why they're different, but I'm just trying to get you used to seeing it. But again, some musicians don't know any of that. They just realize this is my scale, and they just realize they're building the chords, and they're good musicians, but I'll make sure I explain it better. I definitely know how to tell you. I'm just trying to keep it simple for right now. So we got a G chord. Again, later I'll tell you this is an A minor. We're just going to call it an A chord. On the B, we're going to put that sharp in there on the F. So same thing, I'm going to tell you this is a B minor. I'm just going to say it's a B chord. Then a C chord, which this will be a C chord because it's a happy chord. Your D is a happy chord, so that's going to be just a D chord. When I go to the E, that kind of a sad sound, so that'll be an E and then a little M, so E minor. And then this one's kind of a weird one. That's the F sharp A C. That's what we refer to as a diminished chord, so it's like real minor. And then back to what we started on. Okay, now don't get too caught up in the major minor and the diminished. I'll talk about that here in another lesson. Now I'm going to start on a G, still following my scale. The only difference is going to put the pinky on the G, skip the A, the B, and the D. Okay, and then I'm going to just get my fingers out of the way, but 5 finger, 3rd thumb. Now, all I got to do is make sure I sharp that F when it comes up. So that's a G chord. I go up 1 note to the A, skip, skip. So that's my A chord. I'm going to go up to the B note, skip the C, skip the E, but remember you're going to have to get that sharp. It's the same thing, my hand might tilt just a little bit to help, but I'm right on that edge. That's a B, D, and an F sharp. Then I've got my C, E, G, but notice I'm doing the same fingers on all these chords. D, F sharp, A. Again, I went from D, skipped E, F sharp, skipped the G. Okay, and then E, G, B. Same thing, skip F sharp and A. Same fingers, 5, 3, and 1. I get to this last one, you got to tilt your pinky back a little bit to get to F sharp, A, and C. And then I'm back to what I started on. Okay, now again, when I first learned these, I had to go really slow just to kind of get my coordination, How many times do you think I probably went to this and forgot to put the sharp in? Okay, so just go slow. Don't try to go fast. And I'm going to make this look easy, but this is even harder. But eventually, once you get the right hand by itself, you feel comfortable that you're moving it up. And again, I'm just moving straight up. Oops, sorry. Going straight up the scale, meaning G, A, the B, the C, the D, the E, the F sharp, and then the A. If I did that with my left hand, same thing I'm seeing here, going G, A, then the B. Oops, sorry, just remember to put the F sharp in there. Up to C, go up to the D, but still got to put the sharp, because for the F. And then I'm moving up to the E. Same thing, E is going to go up to the F sharp. And then F sharp is going to go up to the G. Okay, then in time, once you get used to them, you'll be able to do the hands together. And these are like little warm-ups I'll show you where you can take the scales that I was showing you, and I'll show you some different patterns on the scales. But like you could practice this, so you know what I'm saying? Obviously when you're ready, but I would never just do it once, do it a few times. Okay, and so forth. Then you can take your chords and then practice doing the chords. That way you're stretching your fingers first. And this is the same thing if you're a singer. It's the same thing you're supposed to do is take scales to stretch out your voice, to warm up. That's honestly all we're doing as a piano player, guitar player, saxophone player. Stretching these fingers out, get the muscles moving, flexibility, gives us more strength when we're playing. Also notice my hands, I'm not being lazy like this. See how my wrists are real bent down here? You don't want, as a piano player, to be lazy like this, because it's going to hurt you when you do something like this if your hand's down. Same thing, you don't want to way up like this. I'm doing it sometimes so you can see my fingers. You just want your wrist to be straight, so it shouldn't be bent, and it shouldn't be bent this way. Pretty straight. Now, main reasons people on computers deal with this, if you got bad posture like this, or that, you're going to, as the years go, start to carpal your wrist out and get some troubles in your wrist. But it also, too, it isn't just for that reason. It helps you stay up on the fingertips. When you're playing your notes, you don't want to be going like this. See my finger, how flat it is? You want to be up on that tip. That way it just helps you play, you know, versus this could bump in, and you just want to be up on those tips. Okay, if you're playing a guitar, same thing, you're up on the fingertips. Okay, so just kind of watch your hands as you're going slow and doing these chords. Make sure you're not you're kind of getting sloppy like that. Make sure you know, just like I said, just pretty much straight. It might bend a little when you have to reach for a couple of the black keys, but for the most part, that's straight. Okay, just do it like that. Let's see if you can kind of see my wrists. They're pretty straight on every one of those. Okay, and then I would also, because it's always harder going backwards. And again, when I see this, if I'm looking at the left hand, I'm seeing the G to the F sharp, to the E, to the D note, just remembering the sharp, the F, then the C, to a B, same thing, I got a sharp the F, to an A, which is on my G. Okay, and that's a great way to practice, and honestly what I'm showing you is the same thing you're going to do in all your scales. So this is me showing how to do chords in the C scale and in the G major scale. As you know, that's why I ran you through all those scales, and I know I probably bored everybody, but I wanted to give you an idea of all the scales. I'm going to tell you the way I see it, there's 12. I'll explain this when we get back into scales. But that means if I'm showing you how the chords work in the first scale, C scale, the C major scale, I'm going to tell you we're doing the same thing in the G major scale. The only thing we have to do is remember to sharp the F. So like when I go to a D scale, our D scale was going to have two sharps, the F sharp and the C sharp. And that again comes from a whole step. I'm starting on the D, then a whole step, then a half step, then then my 3 whole steps, so 1, 2, the 3rd whole step, and then that gets me to finish with my half step. Okay, so I'm going to have 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. But the same thing's going to be true if I'm doing my left hand chords. I'm going to start with the D note, skip the E, just like we, actually you just learned this chord in the G scale. I'll explain this more later, because I don't want to over confuse everybody, but every time you start learning a new scale as you're doing chords, I'll show you and teach you that you actually have already learned some of the chords. And I'll kind of explain that as we go along. But I'm doing the same thing. I move up to the E. Okay, now this is why I didn't start with this key. If I'm on these, I have to go to F sharp. So I'm going to skip the G, A, skip the B, but not a C. That's the chord we did in the last scale, in the G scale, but we need this C sharp. So that's, I'm hitting an F sharp, A, and a C sharp. So we would just call this an F sharp chord. Again, I'll teach you later, it's actually called an F sharp minor because it has that sad sound. Just think of it as an F sharp chord for right now. So we got the D chord. This is an E minor, but we're just going to call it an E chord. F sharp minor. And then your G. Okay, now when I get to the A, I have to remember to sharp the C, because again in this scale we have this note right there. So our scale would be, so I've got these 2 sharps, the F sharp and the C sharp. And that's why I'm putting the C sharp here. If I go to the B, gotta put the F sharp. Then on this last chord, I gotta get to C sharp, so I'm going from B to C sharp. Skip the D, E, skip the F sharp. So I'm hitting C sharp, E, G, and then that would let me finish on, which was the same thing I did down there. Okay, so if I did that, then you're hearing this. And again, I'm doing a chord scale, just following all the notes I learned from my scale. Meaning again, I know that scale is going to be D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. I know that from what I talked about in the last several lessons. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, and then half step. And then what I've shown you in the last video in lesson 10, that's what I'm saying, go back and review it if you need to. And when we start on the D note, the only thing different in lesson 10, I did the C scale. But we're starting in here, I'm showing you a D major scale now. So the D, following these 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. When I go every other note, skip the E, puts me here. That's why I gotta still sharp it. Skip it. So D, F sharp, A. Go to the next chord, I'm going to the next note of the scale, the E, skip the F sharp, G, skip the A. Okay, then that's why I don't go to F, I go to F sharp because that's the note in our scale. Skip the G, go to A, skip the B, but don't go to C, you gotta sharp it. And that's what's kind of hard about piano, sometimes getting used to your fingers, like 1 minute you learn a chord like this, next minute a couple of the fingers are up, sometimes it's 1 finger, sometimes it's 1 this way. That's why piano gets kind of a little bit different as you see it, because of the visual, sometimes the way the heights change around. And sometimes it's a little to the left, sometimes it's going to be a little to the right, sometimes it's a little bit of both of them. So that's why certain scales, and that's why again, why the last several lessons I went through those scales to show you. Knowing those scales kind of helps as you're putting the chords together. Okay? Now, just to recap this, I've shown you 3 scales now where we're kind of taking the 3-note chords, which again are called triads, and I'll go into this more later. But we built those notes off knowing our scale. We built that knowing that the scale comes from whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half. Then I'm telling you, no matter what scale you're doing, you start on the first note and then you skip. You're always going to every other note. I'll tell you later on like what the actual formula is, like as far as like when I was saying the scales going whole step. There's a formula for chords, but I'm just trying to show you to give you a visual so you can see it really easy. So that's 3 scales I've given you now: the C major scale, G major scale, the D major scale. I'm going to show you some other ones, but I also realize if I just do scales the whole time in chords, I'm going to kind of bore everybody. But I want everybody to see this because you can really enhance your playing. You can start seeing chords. When you are sight reading, there's tricks I'd be able to show you too, so you can recognize notes when you kind of recognize your chords. It definitely helps you like learning things by ear. It's going to help you as a songwriter, connecting things. So part of it I'll start showing you in the upcoming lessons too, is how you can take, like, say maybe a D chord, the one I was just showing you, but then later on maybe you'll put, say if you're going from this chord and then you turn around and go up to a G chord. Okay, and then we do this in songs, but sometimes I'll show you can take this chord and you can take these notes out of order. Like I could put the D down here and put the B note down here, which would give me. So then I'll kind of show you, like if I'm going, or I could go. Okay, and in both cases that's a D chord to a G chord. This is a D chord. This is a G chord. Okay, and I'll explain that more better. What I'll do is we're going to go back to the C major scale when we do that, just so I can kind of go back over and show you how to see that. I always start with the C major scale because it just doesn't have any of the sharps or flats, so no black keys. That way you can concentrate on the chords first and get what I'm saying. Then I went to the G major scale because I know it has 1 sharp, so you only have to worry about that 1 black key. I would go to the D major scale next like I did, because then you only have 2 black keys. That way you're slowly adding one. And then eventually when we go back and do them in the flat keys, I'll show you the same thing. You'll pick the one scale that has 1 flat, which will be your F major scale. Then you can concentrate on that 1 black key. Then I would tell you go to the next flat scale that has 2 black keys. And then eventually 3. Okay, and then they just progressively get a little bit harder. Okay? Alright, so definitely go back and review lesson 10 if you're not sure what I'm really talking about on the chords, or if you didn't get to see it so you understand what the key of C is, and the in the G scale I kind of talked about in the beginning there, or at the end of the video, but I introduced it there. And then of course this lesson I've talked about them again too, so you might just want to review lesson 10 along with this one. Spend some time on it, get to kind of know those chords. We're going to be talking about it a bunch here coming up. I'll explain that stuff I was just doing, changing them around. We'll get into that a little bit more later too. So, alright, have some fun, and look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.